If I was 20 again and perfectly healthy, I can understand see the argument of like, you know what? I'm gonna do a lot for like 5 years, and then I'm
Uh-huh.
just gonna be like Steve, and I'm just gonna maintain like 90% of that physique with
Right.
low doses. And it's like,
Yeah.
and then what's the
I think you're
problem? And
bald.
well, then you're bald, yeah, and you forgot all your hair. So
Vigorous Steve here with the Vigorous podcast in collaboration with Dave Maconi from the Brain and Gains podcast. It's
how
been
you doing?
over a year,
Yeah, man.
right?
I think it has been just over a year. Yep.
Shit. And you've done so many podcasts in the meantime, and I'm just getting started, so might as well do it again. How have you
Yeah,
been?
man. I've been good. Yeah, we are up to, I think, right around 150, 160 episodes. So just
Okay,
chugging
wow.
along. It's weird to
Uh-huh.
think that this was started about 3 years ago. I've stuck with about one a week since then.
Hmm.
So yeah, just keep going.
Awesome. Awesome. What was your biggest, latest collaborations? Biggest
I
guests?
had Jeffrey Verdi Schofield and Alpha
Okay.
Destiny on. That was a pretty good
Okay, cool.
one. A lot of people
Cool.
like that. And then I just had a guy. Do you know Natural Hypertrophy? He's a French guy, and he's obviously all about the natty gains.
Of
So we
course.
had some debate there about,
Uh,
the influence of steroids versus genetics. I thought it was a pretty good discussion.
okay. And what was the consensus? Was there a consensus
I
or
don't think there
it
was a
was
consensus. He's much more that I think that he minimizes the influence of genetics, and I say obviously hard work is super important and consistency, but it's
Mhm.
hard for me to understand how somebody could look at just anecdotally what's out there and not conclude that there's huge genetic variations, right?
There is. There
Yeah, I
is.
mean, to me,
Uh,
it's like an of
uh,
course kind of thing, right?
I've helped people also that were drug free, and then you help them for a year or two, and they look like they're on steroids. It's
Hmm.
it's it's unfair because I never got that far with
Yeah,
all the information I had back then, and I see that happen more often than not. That most guys just have an average response. They can make a good physique,
yeah.
but a phenomenal physique. And then what's even worse, the guys that have a good response to natural bodybuilding, they have a great response to drugs,
Oh yeah.
and then they come off and they don't lose any gains. So they stay the same size. They don't shrink, they don't get soft, they don't get
If they
fat.
stay on some TRT, generally though,
No, no,
right?
no, they're off. Like
Really?
this is like one in a million. Off.
Okay.
They do a post-cycle therapy, their testosterone bounces back to like 600, 700,
Hmm.
and they just look like they're still on cycle.
Because you do see a lot of guys like John Meadows and
Mhm.
Dante, a lot of these guys who they use gear for years, they get well past their natural limit,
Right.
and then they go to TRT and they
Uh-huh.
still maintain a ton of it. But a lot
Yeah.
of these guys will say that if they were to completely come off, they'd
Mhm.
shrink a lot.
So I came completely off, and I
Mhm.
wanted to do ACG monotherapy, but it turned out my ACG was fake. So I just recorded a video about it yesterday.
Okay.
It's going live today while we're recording. So my testosterone was like 120 nanograms per deciliter
Wow.
right now. Yeah, I was able to boost it to 200, but probably a single day. And I'm maintaining all of my strength, or most of it, so
Wow.
far. It's been
Really?
7 weeks. Yeah.
Well, the
So
7 weeks
I,
isn't that long, right? I
no,
mean,
so let's see 2 more months or a full year. I
right.
won't make it. I won't make it that long. Let's be
Yeah.
honest.
How long were you
Um,
off when you did your whole where you're, like, fasting and you were really trying to get your health back?
that was 9 months, but at that
9 months.
time, to fix the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, I was off for
Right.
9 months, and then I didn't train for a certain period of time. I barely ate for 6 weeks,
Mhm.
so then I got really really skinny, but I bounced back quite fast, and now I'm able to sustain 97 kilos. So that's, let's say, 200 something pounds.
Yeah.
And I'm still decently strong, and my rep ranges are lower. I'm finally doing reps in reserve now
Okay.
for the first time for the first time in my life. And but I'm somehow able to sustain, and I honestly think that I can continue like this for 2 more months. It's kind of up to the audience what
Yeah.
they decide. I gave them some options. What do you want to
Mm.
see?
Okay.
So I think once the foundation has been built, whether that's drug free or enhanced, like after 10, 20 years of bodybuilding, it's just very difficult to go away, assuming you're eating and training during that time.
What
Yeah.
I see a lot of people talk about is, 1, just length of time that you were on
Mhm.
something, right? Big correlation there. 2, if you continue to eat a decent amount. So, like,
Yeah.
people who, like, they finish a cycle, they continue to eat versus those who then, like, just try to cut right away, and then, I mean, obviously, all of these different stimuli play into how much muscle you're gonna maintain.
Right.
But it is interesting to see the guys who have been at it for a long time, how much they can maintain. And it's almost like you'll find guys who go on for years and then they come off and maybe they say, you know what, I shouldn't have used steroids or, but it's like, I could understand from a natural's perspective being like, yeah, but now you get to have like 20 plus pounds more muscle. Like, I want to
Yeah.
make that mistake too. Like, I understand it, right? But let me make
Yeah.
that same mistake.
It's the same like, they say like, oh, steroids is not worth it, but they're walking around with, 20, 25 pounds more muscle. Yeah, it's a bit
Right.
hypocritical.
Yeah.
It's the same as the ex-smokers that say that smoking was horrible, but when you look at their pictures at the parties, they had a great time.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
no, I mean, I certainly don't regret taking steroids. It's micromanagement. It gets more cumbersome as you age.
Sure.
So
Now you're
that's probably where
38
we're
now?
38. Yeah.
38. Okay.
Yeah,
How you
38.
feeling?
I feel good, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel good. Yeah, I mean, it seems that the industry respects me and appreciates my contribution. So now finally, after 25 years of bodybuilding, I feel like I'm giving back,
Good.
and so that's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. And people are reaching out for all over the world, and I kind of gave up on trying to progress bodybuilding wise,
Mhm.
which is it's kind of like a death sentence, but
Yeah.
it also makes me more at peace with what I got. So around 100 kilos is fine, whether I'm androgen deficient or
Mhm.
on some sort of moderate cycle. And it's all good for me.
Yeah.
Hair, no hair.
Well,
It's
it's a tough thing. I mean, that's
it's
the
fine.
hardest thing with I think anybody who's been lifting for a long time, including myself, right? I mean, I'm going on
Mhm.
16 years of taking it really
Right.
seriously, and it's like
Mhm.
you kind of just realize this is basically it, unless you really
Yeah.
like decide to start blasting stuff. It's just,
Right.
and that you kind of have to accept it because if you don't, what you're just gonna always be frustrated. So
Exactly. Yeah. And you made a decision never to take steroids, or maybe at one point to do TRT, but it's probably still no
no, I
TRT for
mean,
you.
no, I mean, I'm not opposed to TRT at all. I made a whole video on it
Okay.
a month ago, 2 months ago, basically saying that I think it's almost shockingly common how many people in their like mid 20s who tell me that they needed TRT. And it's like, bro,
I don't.
okay, like do what you want, but don't tell me
Yeah.
that half of you need it.
It's the new sports car for midlife crisis guys, but apparently
Yeah.
guys have a midlife crisis when they're 25 years old nowadays.
Well,
The
that's the
world is so
thing.
tough. I need TRT. Get the fuck
Yeah.
out of here.
Yeah. I just, and like, again, like I know a lot of guys who they tell me that they had some like deficiency and it's like, you're clearly somebody who used for a while. Now you're on TRT
Yeah.
and you're just saying that. And it's not like my business, but I just think it's kind of BS in it. But no, for people who
Just
actually need TRT, I think it could be great.
right, but I think the people in our community, the people who actually need TRT medically, is very very small.
Sure.
Because I think a lot of people just want to see what is going to happen with TRT, and they find an excuse. Like, I'm now androgen deficient. I'm not looking for an excuse to get back on.
Hmm.
I'm looking for a solution. Maybe I try some over the counter supplements. Maybe I just continue for a while. Right? Inevitably, I'm going to get back on cycle. But I think a lot of people that are want to start with TRT just convince themselves, oh, my test is 600 or 500 or 400.
Yeah.
I need it. But you can do so much more to increase your natural testosterone production. Right? You can
Yeah.
increase your calories. You can reduce the stress. You can eat a little bit better, remove the alcohol, right? Sleep better. There's so much things you can do just to optimize your lifestyle. And what I feel is that most guys that don't are not willing to undergo that, those are the guys who will get a poor outcome because they're already sick. That's why their testosterone levels are low. And then they go on testosterone. And now you kind of burn the candles for both ends, right? You don't know how to eat, you don't know how to train, you don't know how to
Hmm.
raise your testosterone naturally. And that now, in many cases, the first 8 weeks are good, and then the symptoms get worse. The libido gets worse. The hair loss starts, because they're
Right.
zinc deficient and all that starts. So those guys usually have like a ton of side effects. And yeah, but
Well, I think
my
it's also
happy.
this misperception of what it like, yeah, if you go on like sports TRT and you're on like 250 plus a week, yeah, you're gonna see a significant difference. But like if you're
Right.
actually on like a legit TRT and you just have like total testosterone, 800 nanograms per deciliter, and you were at
Mhm.
450 before, yeah, you're,
Yeah.
you're gonna gain a couple pounds of muscle, but it's not what you think it's gonna be. And now you have
No.
you have the consequences. Well, what are you gonna do when you want to have kids? What are you gonna do when you want to come off? Like, are you okay with doing this for the rest of your life? I mean,
Mhm.
just things to think about.
Yeah, I think a lot of people see it as a quick fix, which in most cases it's not. It's a lifetime commitment, and it
Yeah.
complicates things a lot worse further. As you see, for me, I have to micromanage a lot of more things now than when I was drug free. Life was a lot easier when I was drug free. Okay, your
Yeah.
gains are kind of like meh,
Yeah,
you
right.
know. But yeah, all the other the health managing stuff, you don't really have to think about.
Mhm.
But as long as you eat clean, you do your cardio, you go to the gym. I think it's way less complicated. So the reason why you never got started was because you had a heart condition, right? I think you might
So
as well
yeah, I mean,
tell the audience about it.
I wanted to get into. I mean, that's where a lot of my knowledge base comes from. I looked into it for years, and it was something that I was like, okay, this is just what I'm going to do. And part of it was out of frustration at not getting the results I wanted after like 10 years. And then part of it was just seeing that it kind of invigorated a lot of people's interest. Like I saw like people on forums where they would like, okay, they'd done everything they could, and then here's this whole new thing to explore. And I'm extremely analytical. I have records of everything. So it'd be like, oh, here's this thing to like tinker with. But I'm also extremely health conscious. And I ended up finding out that I had an idiopathic dilated cardiomyopathy. So basically, when we're going to get into obviously your echo results and all
Mm,
that, but if you typically think of the consequences on the heart with steroids, there's a lot of potential issues. But one thing you think of is concentric hypertrophy, which is a thickening of the walls.
mhm.
And I had basically the opposite, which is eccentric hypertrophy, which is like an expansion, so a dilation,
Right.
which is potentially very concerning if it
Mhm.
progresses. So
How are your valves? Is there any regurgitation at the moment?
there's some trivial mitral
Right.
valve regurgitation, which is
Yeah.
pretty normal. At one
Same
point,
as what I have. Yeah, same as
yeah,
what I have.
yeah. At one point, somebody told me I had some mitral valve prolapse. I think
Ooh.
it's minimal, but depending on another thing we'll get into is like whoever is interpreting the scan, right? That can make a difference too. So basically, it definitely sucks, and it's something that
Yeah.
I just always keeps in my mind that like I one need to appreciate the health I do have, but then two
Mhm.
not do anything that like I would just like never forgive myself if I let my ego cause me to do something and then I have some
Right.
big heart issue that like now because people think about, oh, well, something you're commenting here. Well, who wants to live to be 90? If I take 5 years off my life, then who cares? It's like, yeah, but maybe on average you lose 5 years. The steroid users lose five,
Mhm.
10 years, but you're not accounting for the people who cut off 40 years from their life because they had a heart attack that they wouldn't have otherwise
Exactly.
had, you
And that
know?
that seems to be the most common cause of death now in bodybuilders.
Yeah.
Heart
So
attacks. So you
there's
got to be
heart
super,
attacks,
super
there's
careful.
pulmonary embolisms,
Right.
so you just don't know like when that's going to happen. And I know we talked a while back about doing a collaboration with John Meadows, and I've had him on the channel
Right.
a few times. Obviously, he's since passed, and it's very
But
hard to say because he had a genetic predisposition, right? His parents both had clotting issues,
mhm.
but would he still be around if he was 60 pounds lighter and not have lived that lifestyle? Obviously, it's impossible
Yeah,
to know, but you kind of suspect that. And
potentially.
yeah,
But I think John Meadows also learned a lot about his heart because of the lifestyle, just like I learned and you learned, right? You're a bodybuilder, you want to stay on top of your health. And it could be that he actually extended his life because he knew more about it. Because his parents died 5 years or 7 years younger than he did
yeah,
when he
yeah, something like
passed.
that. Yeah.
We thought about having him on a podcast and doing a collaboration about heart health, but
Mhm.
2 weeks before he passed.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was very unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I mean, and you're right. Like, there's obviously so many different, potential things that could happen, but on average, you're probably shortening your life if you're
Oh
holding
yeah.
another 30 plus pounds of body weight, muscle or fat, and using these compounds. And I mean,
Right.
again, Boston Lloyd obviously just passed.
Mhm.
I mean, his is a pretty clear case that if he was not using everything, he'd probably be around. I know there was a little debate there between Derek and Dave Palumbo on the likelihood of it just
Mhm.
being a pure genetic. But I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's what Dave Palumbo likes to do. So yeah, it's just
yeah,
genetics. It has nothing
right,
to do with bodybuilding. But I think everybody understands that it's bodybuilding, but also like it's addictive to experiment. I suffer myself a little bit from
sure,
this, right? You go from compound to compound, trying to figure out a higher truth. Part of that for your own pleasure, and part of that for the community.
hmm
And or somehow you get that on your shoulders, like you know what? I mean, maybe there's a better way. And right, a lot of people have found better ways through self experimentation
sure,
that are actually healthier and less invasive and less destructive than what people were doing in the 90s or even the 2000s. Like modern bodybuilding from a health perspective has only been around for like 2 or 3 years. The community has been very, very active.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, on the flip side of that, you also need to experiment with compounds which are, kind of, yeah, kind of very unhealthy. So,
Yeah. Well, and I think
unfortunately,
people like Derek has talked about this more. I've heard him, but it's funny because I almost feel like an old guy now because you'd hear stuff that would come out, let's say 5 years ago, and then you get the older guys who
yeah.
would say, "Well, this isn't new. This was talked about, whatever." And I know, like, I think if you were to say, "Well, who's brought to the forefront taking, let's say, preventative angiotensin receptor blockers
Mhm.
and ACE inhibitors and things like that?" Like, I think a lot of people would think of like Derek and things like that. But
Yeah,
I,
and John Meadows and a lot of guys of
yeah,
the intense muscle forum, like Dante Trudel and
well,
Ken Skip
that's
Hill, they were all
those two I
around,
was
but
going
it,
to bring up.
it was kind of like
Niche,
only there. It was niche.
exactly.
Like I've heard Justin Harris talk about lisinopril
Yes.
15 years ago.
Well, that's what I was gonna say,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's been around, people have known about it, but,
Mhm.
it's great that it's been there, but these little niche forums are not reaching the huge audience
No,
that,
no.
nowadays it's reaching, which is great.
No, so I think thanks with a channel like Derek's, where at least you just got 1 million people that follow him, and
Yeah.
average views for like 250,000 per video. So
Mhm.
that's a lot of people that he's reaching
Yep.
with these healthier practices. So I always feel like for me, it's like a little bit too late, and it's mostly for the next generation that is, like for you, for example, you quit before you got started, right, with
Right.
steroids because you had a risk with your heart. And I think a lot of people are way more aware about the potential risks which could happen on your organs, not just the
Mhm.
pimples and the hair loss and the gyno, but actually the
Yeah.
organ stress that all these steroids and the lifestyle could potentiate if you're not careful. And even I was careful, and I still got a little bit of heart enlargement, which we'll discuss soon. But I think now the information is more out there, so it's very good. It's
Yeah.
very good, but like for guys like me, it came like 15 years too late,
Right. Right.
unfortunately. So a lot of us,
But you can
our guys are
still.
like very very active now, just to give back as much as we can. So at least the
Right.
next generation, 20-year-olds, if they're willing to listen,
Yeah.
they can
Get
make the
hip.
choice. Yeah, I mean, we all do silly shit, when we're younger.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
but it's mostly cumulative. So if you do dumb shit for 10 years, okay, it catches up with you.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, so your Echo, do you wanna pull up the side by
yeah,
side?
let me see how we're gonna do this. Okay, guys, it's the first time I'm using StreamYard. So I think here are the echoes. I can't see you guys, but you guys can hopefully see me. So on the left side here,
Mhm.
that is the Echo of 2021. I think it was taken in August. And this one was the Echo of 2022 on the right side. That was taken last week. So now we
Yeah.
can directly compare. Hopefully, you guys can see it. And otherwise, yeah, I'm very, very sorry. Doing the best I can with the screen
Yeah, no,
sharing
I think it looks pretty good.
possibilities. Right.
So for people who just have, like, no base knowledge of it, basically, he got an echocardiogram done. It's like an ultrasound on the heart. So you'll see
Mhm.
above here, I don't well, I guess it's not gonna pick up my recording, but where it says
Yeah.
ECG, so an
Right.
ECG and an EKG are the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's just one was just in a different language, but basically, yeah, same thing. And that's basically the electrical impulses of the heart being measured. So that's going to be like any standard cardiology visit. They'll hook you up, have like the little things to your chest and some other areas,
Right.
and they'll
I think
have
I
that.
have the results here. I didn't scan it yet. Oh, where is it? That's probably somewhere else. I have so many documents. I
I'm
just
sure.
literally came out of the hospital and then we started recording.
But his having sinus bradycardia, that's
Yeah.
very normal for somebody who's athletic. My resting heart rate is in the 40s as well.
Yeah.
Nothing to worry about, but that's just technically what it's called. Now, what's interesting is you had a
Oh,
74%. Go ahead.
quick remark. In
Yeah.
both cases, I was using 5 milligrams nebivolol, which
Hmm.
is a beta blocker.
Yep.
And it is important to note because on the left side, that was me off cycle for about 9 months. So there could have already been some left ventricular hypertrophy, but because I was off cycle for 9 months, it probably shrank slightly because I was using a beta blocker. And so the nebivolol and telmisartan preventatively. But on cycle, I was still using this. So when I introduce the steroids again, and you see the changes, which we'll discuss afterwards, the 5 milligrams nebivolol and the 40 milligrams telmisartan I was running was not potent enough to prevent a little bit of left ventricular hypertrophy. So keep that in mind, guys.
Right. So, and again, I'm sure people listening to this have some idea, but beta blockers and ARBs and ACE inhibitors. So telmisartan is an ARB,
Hmm.
angiotensin receptor blocker, and that is what we're trying to do with that is prevent negative remodeling, negative cardiac
Exactly.
remodeling, or even reverse negative cardiac remodeling. So
Hmm.
studies show that beta blockers have a stronger effect in that regard, but both will provide that function.
Right. So I
So
feel that after 9 months off cycle and predominantly doing cardio, not training so hard, I feel that the beta blocker was able to reverse some of a left ventricular hypertrophy or heart enlargement, which was potentially there previously, but I don't have another EKG or ultrasound to prove that of my previous cycles. I only have two, and these are the only two that I have to compare. So we'll have
so
to do with what we got.
Yeah, and now this is where it's a little bit interesting because you have to look at the different interpreters. So I was saying how
Mhm.
you when you do an MRI, for example, so an MRI is a little bit more accurate than an echocardiogram, and it's less
Right.
open to interpretation. Echocardiogram, I mean, for the most part, they're kind of just looking at these scans, and there's like a visual estimation to it.
Right.
So when he had 74% versus 60% left ventricular
Yeah.
ejection fraction, I mean, 74% is quite high. It's actually
No, it's
above
it's
what
higher than the range. So we can
yeah.
compare this one. This is the MRI, which was taken, I think, 2 weeks later.
Mhm.
And there you see the left ventricular ejection fraction is 90 or 65%.
Yeah.
So that's the MRI, which was taken at the same time as the first ultrasound, the echocardiogram. So this is, by the way, this is the exact same examiner on this hospital. So even the exact same examiner, albeit that it, of course, taken under different scenarios, might still get a different reading. So because I don't think that my ejection fraction reduced that much,
Mhm.
based on everything else that we have here in these documents.
And so
The
what's
sa-
interesting is he makes a comment here, like the interpreter, and he says there is eccentric on the second one here,
yeah,
eccentric left ventricular hypertrophy. But keep in mind what I
yeah,
said, eccentric is a dilation.
right,
Previously, he said there is no left ventricular dilation or hypertrophy, right?
right,
However,
hmm,
if we actually look down at the values here, you
right,
see where it says LVIDD and LVIDS. So
right,
that is left ventricular end diastolic diameter during
hmm,
diastole, which is the relaxation of the heart, and systole, which is a contraction. And you actually see a smaller dilated number,
right,
5.9,
hmm,
on the second one versus
exactly.
the first one. And yet he is saying that there's eccentric hypertrophy in the second one and not in
Hmm.
the first one. So that's a little bit odd to me.
Yeah. No, I see. Yeah, it's I have no explanation for it. I was just explained what the interpreter saw.
Yeah. So you actually had a
Um,
slightly increased dilation after your
mhm,
9 months off cycle. And now again,
right.
I mean, a 0.1 centimeter, that's basically the same is how really
Yeah,
they would interpret it. It's the same.
because
But it
when you compare some of the other numbers, they're also off by about 0.1 centimeter, right? The
right.
IVSD and the IVSS, it's also 0.1. Of course, the LVIDS is off a little bit more. That's half a centimeter from 3.4 to 4 centimeters. Can you see my cursor, by the
I
way?
can, yeah. So what that
Okay,
means is
okay.
and that's why you have a lower ejection fraction percentage because that's
Right,
calculated by how much is being pushed out, right? So
right,
what that's saying for people listening is that when his heart contracted, it ended at 4 centimeters, whereas before it ended at 3.4. So it was
right.
contracting a little bit less.
I think in these cases, like after months of training to failure and really training hard, I think my heart just remodels mostly to accommodate this high stress environment. And previously, I was purely doing cardio, quite high intensity on the elliptical, so my heart rate would go up quite high and a decent um, level on the incline machine. So I think it's just your heart kind of adapts to whatever stress you put it to.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of doctors would tell you that this is basically the same in terms of the dilation.
Hmm.
Could
Right.
be there's some small changes. I think they would say it's basically equivalent. Although what's interesting is if you go back a little bit, like move that back
Hmm.
to yeah, there you go. So if you look like 1.1 and 1 and then 1.6,
Hmm.
1.7, that's basically the same. But the
Right.
values that we're looking at as normal is about zero point 0.6 to 1.1. So you might see like, oh shoot, he's got like 1.6, 1.7. That's like super high. But what
Right.
we're looking at is actually during the diastolic phase.
Right.
So So that 1.1 is top of the normal range, but it would still be
Hmm.
considered normal. So this would not be
Right.
an example of like extreme concentric hypertrophy.
No, that's what the doctor also told me. He said borderline left ventricular hypertrophy, and also for my body weight, which increased
Right.
because at the previous MRI, or sorry, previous EKG, I was about 92 kilos, and here I was 97, but
Mm,
actually coming down from 100 kilos. Now, keep in mind that this EKG, in both cases, I was at normal testosterone levels. Well, the latest
mm,
one, of course, I was androgen deficient. But what I would expect is that these levels would actually be higher on cycle because my heart would be larger due to these anabolic steroids being present in my body.
that's
And
what
the
you
heart
think.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, and the heart is a muscle just like anything else. Just like your biceps will grow on steroids, so will your heart. So I think these measures would be more skewed
Right.
if I were to take them on cycle. So another job for me is the next time I do this again is to do an ECG on cycle, not in both cases where I was off cycle.
Right. Like another echo.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
yeah, do another echo because unfortunately, it takes a little bit longer to schedule these things. And so I was, 6 weeks later of actually testing this on cycle. But
Yeah.
it is what it is.
The biggest change I see, other than so, if people see the FS here, FS fractional shortening, that's going to correlate with
Oh,
your
where's the FS?
FS 43.2%
Oh, there.
shortening.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so that's going to correlate with your ejection fraction. That's why you see it bigger in the first and second.
Right.
But the biggest difference you can actually see is the posterior wall thickness. So that's that LVPWD and S there.
Hmm.
That did increase quite a bit. That I
Right.
would say would be something that doctor would say is significant, and you are definitely towards that upper range there where you'd want to be aware of it. It would be
Hmm.
interesting to see. In an ideal world, if you could just always get echoes, it would be interesting to see if you do, let's say, another 4 months off cycle, get it tested again with your ARB and your beta
Right.
blocker
Exactly. Yeah.
and see if it comes back down.
I would be able to do it if my doctor just doesn't get annoyed with me because
Yeah.
every time I go there said I need another test, I need another MRI, I need another CT. So why are you doing all this stuff?
Yeah, for the YouTubes.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, I can't. That's why I have to remove all the markings in my name in the hospital because they don't want this stuff to be on YouTube,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
okay.
Yeah. It's a great
And then
hospital though,
yeah,
right? But they technically don't want this online.
right.
Uh,
Interesting.
Too bad.
Um,
Here it
the
is.
volumes are probably gonna be high. Like, if you look up, like, normal echocardiographic volumes, yours are gonna be high.
Mhm.
Mine are certainly high, but again, I don't have, like, a completely normal heart. So, in your situation, you mentioned relative to your body weight, right? And that's how they do a lot of these things. They
Right.
look at, like, body surface area, and then they index it to that. So even though a lot of these values are upper normal, if you were to look at it per your body surface
I
think
think it's here at one of
yeah,
some of
so
these
grams per
numbers.
meter squared, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and it is your left ventricular mass is higher in the second one, so that might be
Mhm.
part of their interpretation as well.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right here, left ventricular mass. And that's actually quite a big difference
it
from
is,
234 grams to 271 grams.
right.
And it's just
So
impossible to navigate. Sorry, guys.
no, no, yeah. So that is significant, but and again, you can see so many different values even with the same person, and like the same like as in the same tester versus the same testee.
Mhm.
But I would say that is significant. So just something to be
Right.
aware of. I think, do you
And
have? I wonder if you have any diastolic values here, like E prime, A prime, EA ratios, things like that. I thought I saw those
no,
in
and
another thing. Maybe not.
then maybe this one here, the proximal
No,
is
that's
no
your aortic diameter.
too
Um,
many.
Yeah, I
It's
think it
funny.
might have been on some of the other stuff you sent. Oh, wait, there you go. Yeah, the Doppler measurements there.
Oh,
So, yeah, so if you look at your like Emax velocity, yeah, like so if you look at EA ratio,
sorry.
it's a little bit confusing at times because there's the ratio, but then you have to look at the actual values. And so
Where are
you
we on the eight? The
uh so where it says MV Emax velocity,
all right. Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Got it.
and so yours is fine. So I'm sure your doctors would tell you that you have normal diastolic function. And actually,
Mhm.
just looking at these, they might even say that. You could say some are supraphysiologic, Steve.
Yeah, but I said before, like this one is, for example,
Yeah, that's
117 centimeters per
quite
second, and this one
high.
is 77. Yeah.
And what's interesting, if you look at your EA ratio, this is why the actual values matter. Your EA ratio is identical, right? 1.5 in
Mhm.
both.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the actual values before are significantly higher. Let's
Right.
see, your deceleration time is, yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if they put that in the interpretation, but I would say you have normal diastolic function as well. So,
Yeah, I mean, in both cases, they said my ultrasound was kind of uneventful.
mhm.
Besides that, now of course I have borderline left ventricular hypertrophy,
Yeah.
and I discussed at length with the doctor, and he said, your heart on the previous one kind of looks like an athlete, and the one on the that you did recently, a week ago, that one actually looks like a strength athlete. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, here she didn't see so many strength athletes, so she wasn't able to confirm if this amount of left ventricular hypertrophy comes from training hard and strenuous, or it comes from taking steroids and training hard and
Yeah.
strenuous.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, there are studies on echocardiograms of top level athletes where
Mhm.
their thickness, their diastolic fitness or fitness thickness, excuse me,
Yeah.
is like where we were saying yours is 1.1, theirs could
Yeah.
be 1.4, 1.5, like really high.
Yeah.
But one, they're elite athletes. Two, we happen to know that a lot of elite athletes are enhanced. So again,
Yeah.
which is it? You know,
Right.
it's hard to
And
decipher.
and properly enhanced for maybe a decade,
Right, right.
so, and I was properly enhanced at one point or another, but for the last, well, almost 2 years now, it's been kind of moderate. So I do think there's a little bit of remodeling involved. I would have killed to have a time machine and see what my ultrasound
Yeah,
would look like 2 or 3 years back when I was taking maybe 2,000 milligrams of testosterone per week, or
yeah.
a cycle of 2,000 milligrams steroids per week. I think it would have been way worse than these values that we see here.
It would be interesting to know for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And actually, I mean, and again, there's a genetic component to it. So I've had my brother tested because, like I said, mine is idiopathic, so we're not sure.
Right.
But my brother and I actually just went back. So I used to work in like a research lab, exercise science research lab, and
Mhm.
we did a VO2 max test together recently. So I convinced him to go through that miserable test. um,
Yeah.
and, uh, and so that's that's correlated with age and weight and whatnot.
What about your parents? Did you ever subject them to some sort of testing or imaging for their heart? So you see a
Yeah, my dad has a
yeah.
normal echo, pretty normal
Yeah.
echo. My brother's was closer to mine than
Okay.
my dad. So my brother actually his dilation was 5.7, and this was when he was like
Okay.
170 pounds.
Wow.
Mine was like 6.2. So
Hmm.
whereas yours is like 6.0 there.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously a lot lighter than you. So, there is a genetic component. And then a lot of this stuff is like people like you and we're so analytical with this. We want all the numbers. But sometimes the doctor would just be like, yeah, we have this number, but like, what do you do with that? Right? What do you do with that number? Like I could tell you, well, like, maybe this number is a little bit high, and potentially the answer is, oh, we put you on beta blocker or ARB and see what happens. But
Right. Exactly.
sometimes it's just monitoring and see how you do.
Exactly. And all the heart specialists that I've talked to so far say that it's, within normal parameters, just something you have to keep track of and make sure that it doesn't get worse. Of course, my doctor asked me to stop taking steroids.
Yeah, sure.
And then I told her it's like a doctor not going to PubMed to do research. Then she understood. She's like, okay, that kind of makes sense, if you
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's and of course as I get older, I'm getting way more conservative. So the next cycle will probably be less than what I ran the last time.
So what
And
what like level of doses are you using at this point? Is that something you talk about in
so
the
so
show?
yeah, of course, yeah. So the last cycle I did between 280 something milligrams and 600. And then I called it quits. I did some peptide experiments. I didn't
So
take any
880
insulin.
total.
So yeah, the first increment was 280 milligrams. So that's 150 milligrams of test and 125 milligrams of primo.
Okay.
People say I can't even call it a cycle, but it's not
Mhm.
TRT either.
Yeah.
And then 3 months into that, I think I bumped it up to 235 milligrams of test and 375 primo. And then I had some anavar
Uh,
at the end and some torkestrone experiments. So there's always a little bit more in the picture.
yeah.
No GH, no insulin this time, which I would run in the past. And that's I feel steroid wise is pretty moderate. but with some peptide experiments here and there, right? It's all cumulative and all adds up.
Yeah.
Right? Even the ancillaries are running through your liver, so there's some liver stress from
Right.
every medication that you take. Yeah, so it was a moderate cycle, albeit a complicated one. And going forward, now that I've done most of the experiments that I still wanted to do, I think the next one is going to be pretty mild. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean that really is relatively mild, especially compared to what you hear some people doing. So,
Yeah. No, but
but
I've been there myself as well. I've been there myself in the past, and you're bursting out of your sleeves, and it's a great feeling. But when you're 30, you can get away with it, but when you're close to 40, you can't. And you see all
yeah,
these guys at 40 start to get real serious issues with their kidneys, with their heart. People start dying before they're 40,
right.
with their heart attacks and kidney issues. And so you just get more conservative
Yeah,
and it's been going on for years, but nobody knew about it because social media wasn't so prevalent.
right.
And this
Well,
guy
and
died. Oh, what happened? Oh, and
yeah,
then
exactly. You just didn't hear
people
about
forget
these
about it.
things.
Yeah, you
Right,
didn't hear about
right,
it. Yeah.
and it's tough because honestly, like I certainly promote I think most people should stay natural, right, for the reasons we've already
Mhm.
discussed. But I do understand the temptation and honestly, like if I was 20 again and perfectly healthy, I can understand see the argument of like, you know what? I'm gonna do a lot for like 5 years, and then I'm
Uh-huh.
just gonna be like Steve, and I'm just gonna maintain like 90% of that physique with
Right.
low doses. And it's like,
Yeah.
and then what's the
I think you're
problem? And
bald.
well, then you're bald, yeah. You forgot all your hair, so
I lost your hair. Getting
yeah.
huge.
But, like, I'm just saying I like, it's not what I advocate, but I
Yeah.
get it, if you think, "Hey," it's like a lot of things in life, I'm gonna put in the work, and then I'm gonna be able to kinda coast on that.
It's kind of my reasoning as well. It might be better just from like 20 something, like 25 to 30. Maybe early 20s is a little bit too young, mostly because you don't know what you want out of life.
Yeah.
And you're a little bit too risky. But let's say like the guys that I work with coaching wise, usually from around 25 years old, they're a little bit more financially secure to pay for all the medical screening that's required,
Yeah.
and also medically or financially secure enough to buy all the pharmaceuticals, not the
Mhm.
underground garbage that is so prominent in the scene. So I think, let's say from 25 to, let's say, 32 or something, you just grow the shit out of your physique,
Right.
right, with a proper protocol, and then you maintain. Then the job done. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be easy 240, 250 pounds, right? Depending on your height. And you just keep it there on TRT, and maybe you do a little cycle here and there and just keep it there. But
Yeah, I mean, and again, like, how many people are gonna have the willpower to step back completely? I think,
it's so
for a lot of
difficult, dude.
people, it's gonna
It's
be
so difficult.
very tough, right? "Oh, well, I'm never gonna have that high again. I'm never gonna I mean, I feel that way even not taking stuff, right? But to know, like, because think about it, like, right now, if let's say I'm like, "You know what? I'm really tempted." Like, I just joined a new gym, and the physiques
Mhm.
are, like, so much better than the old gym I was at, and I'm walking
Right.
around here like a buck 90. I'm like, "Dude." Um, but so like you
Right.
see that temptation. But if I want to do something, I know it is a whole process to do that, right? Like I have
Yeah.
to get started. I'm going to shut myself down, etc.
Mhm.
But if you're already on TRT, you're on 150 TRT a week. How
Yeah.
easy is it to just say, 8 weeks?
No, the threshold is gone. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
a video about this. Like,
All
for the
right.
guys that are really thinking about starting, once you open Pandora's box, nothing is off limits anymore.
Right. It's
You do
so
your
easy to
first cycle, hopefully you have a good experience, and then, okay, next cycle, maybe I'll throw in some trim, which you shouldn't be doing, but that's what I did also. I got
Mhm.
experience now, let's throw in the trim. And then you add this and this and this, and before you know it, you got experience with all these compounds, you know exactly how your body feels. You do your blood work, and so what about this? Oh, what about that? And this is kind of where the addiction to experimentation comes from.
Yeah.
And I've consultations about this every week. Every week, dude. I have this. I
Yeah.
watch your YouTube channel. I'm on this and this and this and this and this. And then I'm wondering, like, fuck, man, I'm trying to find a better way, but it seems that everybody's just following, and then combining everything, which is not really what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's exciting and fun to
Right.
do. Just
Sure.
like you buy your first sports car, and then you drive it for a while, and it's fantastic,
Hmm.
and then you get bored, and then you want a faster car,
Yeah.
yeah, or more exotic one.
Yeah. So I'm like a generally conservative person.
Mhm.
Like I don't like, buy all these expensive things.
Mhm.
But my brother's in the cars. So I took him for his birthday to I have a few patients who sell like very high end cars and whatnot.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
we drove some McLarens, and
Oh,
then uh, I was with somebody who had like the new C8, and then
yeah.
I test drove like what my dream car would be, and it was like this 1 month of like I'm watching the videos and everything, and I got
Yeah,
so
yeah,
into it, and
yeah.
I was like
Right.
close to pulling the plug there, and or
Oh,
puncture it,
really? Okay, yeah, you came very close, huh? You almost
and
punched your natty card, but car wise.
right, right, right. But then I said, let me just like take a month away from it. I'm not gonna watch any
Right.
videos. I just and after the month, I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna spend that on that car. Like it just
Yeah.
was like a very emotional decision, right?
Mhm.
And I think maybe that's what some people need to do. If like you're really thinking about using, then like step
Mhm.
away from it, step away from the YouTube videos and Instagram, not our YouTube,
Yeah,
obviously continue to watch our
that's a
YouTube
good
channels,
point.
but but really
That's
like
a
step
good
away
point.
and
Yeah.
just see like do you still care enough to do it. Like take that emotion out of it. It's impossible to fully take the emotion out, right? But
Yeah.
step back, and if after a month you're like, no, like this is actually I have a dream of being a pro bodybuilder, or this is
Mhm.
just then maybe you do it. I'm not going to tell anybody what they should definitely do.
Right.
I just think you got to think about it.
But that's a good point to make because I think nowadays in the fitness industry, because everybody's so open about it,
Mhm.
steroids are everywhere. I think, right? If you go to my Instagram page, for example, and I start scrolling, before when you're younger, you have boobs, right? And hot girls. And
Yeah,
now I
yeah.
just have bodybuilders that are jacked and shredded. So you constantly get this confirmation like, okay, everybody's shredded. Everybody's, even though they're old pictures. So
Mhm.
you kind of
Right, right,
condition
right.
yourself that you need to be a part of that industry. And it's funny when I traveled for a year through Asia and I didn't look into bodybuilding at all. And I already did my first cycle at that point. I did my PCT. I recovered just fine. I started traveling. I became skinny fat, shadow of my former self. And I didn't really think about steroids at all. I thought about training
Yeah.
and going to the gym and having a good workout, but I didn't really think about steroids until I came home and it was winter. And I went to the gym and I saw these jack dudes. And within a week, I was back on cycle.
Well, this is why I think I had a whole video on this where I said,
Mm,
personally, I think it is total BS when people say, like, only focus on yourself or don't worry about what other people are doing. The reason
mm,
being that it's like, yeah, that's great to say, and it's a good message, see what you can improve and work on that, etc.
right.
But to act like we are not all greatly influenced by our surroundings and what we see is just
Yeah.
totally naive. And like I said, I feel it being at this better gym. And I was just down in Florida and like seeing like all this, these people. And versus like you mentioned in Asia, and I have a Jeffrey Verdi Schofield. I don't know if you've seen his channel,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I've seen it. Yeah.
and
Mm.
he lives in I think in China, and
Yeah. In
like no,
Guangzhou or some middle of
oh I don't
nowhere.
know,
Yeah. Mm,
but he's like the biggest person around
yeah.
because there's just not a lot of like big people there, and so it's a totally different influence than around here. So again, obviously you don't want to become obsessed with the people around you, but to act like that's not going to influence your mindset, I think is naive.
No, I think, and it's the people around you. So if you go to a bodybuilder gym where there's a ton of bodybuilders and everybody's taking steroids, I think you open that Pandora's box a lot sooner. Like I
Mhm.
always made sure that I trained in bodybuilders gym, but I still stayed natural for 10 years
Mm.
because I wanted to focus on my consultation career. And then that kind of fell through the economic crisis. Then I wanted to see what all the fuss was all about. But I didn't have access to social media at that time, right? I didn't have
Mm.
Facebook, Instagram wasn't around.
How big
And
did you get
now
naturally?
88 kilos, fat,
Really? Okay. So what's that?
200 pounds. Yeah, 200 pounds.
Huh. So let's
Not
see.
great.
At
Not
what
great.
body fat? So how
17, maybe
17?
more.
And if you were
Yeah,
to
maybe
be
probably 20.
17% fully enhanced, how much would you
Yeah.
weigh?
I never got up to 17%, but
Oh, really?
yeah, I didn't let my get to, because back then, like we're talking about 13 years ago,
Yeah.
or like 15 years ago, you did dirty bulking all winter. It was
Sure.
cold. And then you might walk around for 10 minutes in the morning just to work up your appetite. And you would just eat and eat and eat and eat. And the nutritional information wasn't really there.
Right.
And the steroid information certainly wasn't there. We creatine was the latest, newest thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think with the information I have now, if I were to able to help some similar guy at this point in time when we have access to all this stuff, I probably could have been 220. But back then the information wasn't there, or I didn't know how to find it.
Yeah.
So So I think, 200 pounds, 220 pounds maximum, 70% body fat. And now I think if I wanted to, I can get up to 270 pounds
I was gonna
fully
say, so
enhanced.
50 plus pounds of muscle, you
Yeah,
know?
if not 70, if
But
not,
Steve,
yeah.
I thought steroids were just the icing on the cake. Or just the last it's all hard
Yeah,
work, and
that's
so
that. Oh, these fucking liars, dude. Oh, no, no, no. I remember when I went on my first cycle, 250 test, everybody thought it was a joke. Right? Why would you only do one ample test? It's a waste. I gained 5 kilos in 5 weeks.
Yeah,
And I was eating 5,000 calories at the time. It was like at the end of off season. It's like now I'm gonna grow. So I was eating a ton of food, right? Everything was ramped up. My body was ready to absorb all these steroids. And just every workout, stronger, bigger, stronger, bigger. Right? I need to buy new clothes within a month.
yeah,
And then I started leaning out because my metabolism was so revved up. So I was like, okay, fuck it. I'm gonna tell him just bulk into a cut. And then I ended up at 2,200 calories or something, and 5 kilos heavier than our previous leanest when I was drug free and leaner. So it's a huge fucking difference, and
yeah.
that's why everybody takes them. And then the cat is out of the back of the trimbolone sandwich.
Right.
So people are in the trimbolone sandwich from the start, and then you can do basically everything wrong, and you still get a good physique. That's why we have
Right,
so many beach pods nowadays.
yeah,
All these guys do it. And if you really dig into it, they're doing everything wrong, or there's a lot of room for improvement, but
yeah.
they're on trend, so they get great results anyway. And we all learn at that start, but a lot of guys don't really get out of that.
Yeah, and that's where I think, if you are natural or you wanna stay natural, it's like, can we learn from enhanced people? Obviously, right? I mean, John Meadows,
Yeah,
I think, was a really good crossover of somebody who would,
absolutely.
like, teach naturals and whatnot. Although my personal opinion, and I know a lot of other people feel this way, I do think it's impossible once somebody is enhanced for a long time, I
Hmm.
think it's impossible to take out some bias, and
Yeah.
I just think your views just get colored. I think you almost forget. Like I had Pete
No,
Rubish on
yeah.
maybe a
Hmm.
year ago, probably get him on again soon, and he was saying like he was that person because like everything was working because he was enhanced, and then now that
Yeah.
he's like fully natural, he's like, wow, this is so much harder, and it's just like
It
it's
is.
so different. And I think when you're enhanced, you just forget. Like, you remember Jerry Ward? Do you remember
Yeah. Hmm.
bioethics? And
Hmm.
he was like, I don't know, I forget what weight he was. Maybe it was like 220, whatever he was, and he had been enhanced for like 20 years. And he was
Hmm.
like, guys, I'm only 20 pounds more muscle than I used to be naturally. Like, you don't think I could have gained 1 pound per year? Like, he was basically trying to say that the steroids hadn't netted him anything.
Oh
And
wow. Yeah.
and after like 20 plus years and now being on
Hmm.
TRT. And he's like, you guys don't think I could have gained 1 pound per year naturally? And I'm like, no, not for 20 years after you've already been lifting for 15 years. Are you crazy?
No,
But he
I
was
mean,
just totally colored his view.
yeah, and I think it's because like when you're on steroids, it's first of all it's more forgiving, right? You get better results for less effort. And if you do it 100% correctly, you still need to modify your training, your diet, because your body changes.
Yeah.
The training is not the same on steroids, whereas compared to drug free, and the nutrition is not the same because you need different nutrients because you burn through them quicker. You have more protein turnover, you need more zinc, you need more selenium, you need more, you sweat more, you need more micronutrients. And on the flip side of that, you can diet way harder in a shorter period of time because you have all this muscle sparing steroids in
Sure.
the picture. Whereas a natty diet is like 6 months, and then the last 2 months is also walking around being androgen deficient because your body
Yeah.
just shuts down. And that's why
Why
these
did
guys that
you
they have no testosterone anymore at the end. Yeah.
yeah, I know you mentioned you're currently androgen deficient.
Mhm.
Why do you come off at all at this point rather than just doing low dose TRT?